She was impressed. He was smart, knew what he was doing, unpredictable, brave, stupid. Rena caught herself almost wishing they'd met in another life. She didn't want to kill him. He was skilled, and it fascinated her. She'd never seen anyone fight like this before. Thinking this way was not good. Not good for her, not good for her mission, and not good if Luke caught her thinking it. But she couldn't help it.
This is the second episode of a series that I'm thinking of continuing called Did Not Finish, in which I identify some flaw, some problem, something that's not working in a book that caused me to not finish it, and what I think the author could have done better. And in this particular episode, I want to talk about separating creative, expansive writing from the process of revising, specifically revising to remove. The book that I'm going to use as an example is Time of Death by V.S. Ford. First off, what's working great about this book? For one thing, actually, I love the cover art. I think the cover art is fantastic. It's a bit of a cartoony style, but it's sort of dark and ominous as well, with lots of blacks and reds, and I think that fits this book perfectly. It's got a really fun premise. It's an assassin romance. What's not to love? And reading this book, I can see that the author is clearly enjoying herself, is passionate about the story that she wants to tell. So what's not working? For me, the key thing was a lack of polish in the prose, and I want to specifically focus on issues of redundancy. A lot of sentences seemed to repeat the same idea that was presented in the previous sentence, or something was told to the reader and then subsequently also shown to the reader. In a lot of places, it felt like the author hadn't settled on their final phrasing.
You saved my life just to kill me? What good did that do you, love? His voice was constricted with pain, and his accent was just short of satisfying, like she hadn't heard him speak enough. She wanted to get him to talk more, just to hear his voice.
Right there are 3 repetitions of pretty much the same thing. His accent was just short of satisfying. Like she hadn't heard him speak enough. She wanted to get him to talk more just to hear his voice. Now, it could be argued that this style is intentional, but I have my doubts, and it wasn't the only place where I had these issues, but this is the one I want to make an example of. It is very common when writing an early draft to write things in multiple ways, multiple times, to have this repetition in your writing. And I think it's actually an extremely valuable habit to develop as a writer. It's brainstorming. It's letting your creative juices flow. By all means, write 3, 4, 5, 10 versions of a single line, of a whole paragraph, of a name, of a little squirt of dialogue, of a whole chapter even. Nobody nails it on the first try, so write different versions. And then later on, when you're revising, pick out the best parts from different versions, see how they need to mingle together, or cut entire versions that aren't working in their entirety. There are both great ideas in this book, and some really excellent implementations. His accent was just short of satisfying. I think that's a really creative and intriguing way to tease at this blossoming romantic interest. And I want to be clear, I am absolutely nitpicking. This is very much late revision sorts of issues, but they come from those early drafts when the author is playing around with different versions of the story, different versions of individual sentences even. And it's not like the professionals don't struggle with exactly these same issues. Here's a line written and published by New York Times best-selling author John Scalzi. Gammis and Cheryl both held their ground and didn't back up, but stayed where they were. Oh, really? Did they also freeze in place? Hold the line, not move. Stand still, remain motionless? You get the idea. But the problem is, I caught that one dumb sentence deep into book 2 by Scalzi, not on page 13, which is the issue I had with this book. It's an unfortunate truth that authors who are trying to get published or who are debut authors are held to a higher standard than established authors, especially best-selling ones.
Wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about the risk-averse publishing industry that only publishes what's marketable and not necessarily what constitutes good storytelling? Wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about the stigma associated with self-publishing? Wouldn't it be nice to dream of fetch and chasing cats?
So writers, put it all out on the page when you're writing draft 1, draft 3, draft 5. But cut it back when you're writing draft 2, draft 4, draft 6, or whichever iterations work for you. Sometimes you should put your brain in expansive, creative mode, adding flourishes, expanding descriptions, exploring conversations between your characters, or how it feels to add a few more beats to that action scene. Did you really need to end on that cliffhanger? Or was there more left unsaid in that scene? Other times your brain needs to be put in critique gear. Get out the scissors, cut away the cruft. Refine the sentence structure, tidy up your mess into a tight, well-crafted story. So, Time of Death, great premise, a great promise of action and romance, a fun style that conveys the author's enjoyment of the story. But for me, there were too many potholes on an otherwise smooth reading road.